Most book lovers intimately know two very particular delights. The first occurs when you successfully convince someone hesitant that there's great beauty and value in a work of art you love. The second is when you encounter an argument that so thoroughly worms its way into you that not only does a text you disdained metamorphosize before your eyes, but literature itself takes on a new glimmer. These pleasures are far from foreign to me, whether with highbrow literature like Rousseau, whose work I loudly bashed until a specialist helped me find a way in, or lowbrow art like Riverdale, whose wackiness kept me outside till all of a sudden it just clicked and I needed to let everyone know. I know well the thrill of a critical experiment. Both convincing and being convinced entail a degree of vulnerability and risk. When sharing your experience of a text, you are reaching out, inviting someone into your particular mode of sight. When you allow your mind to be changed, you accept the cringe of your previously held position and surrender to a new perception. To me, these experiences and others like it amount to the work of criticism. Looking to a recent critical issue on the subject, from the academic journal New Literary History, we learned that criticism is an appeal, not a syllogism. Becca Rothfield says, "The best criticism is capable of yanking people out of their own flesh and plunking them into somebody else's." A failure of a critic did not necessarily fail to grasp the facts. Rather, she failed to make herself understood. Here's where the amateurism comes in, though. Literary criticism doesn't just belong to academic scholars or fancy journalists at prestigious journals. Criticism has always existed beyond, even transcended, the professionalization of literature in the university setting. There's many examples of critical publics amassing beyond the credentialed boundaries of the university. I'll talk about a few more examples later in the video, but if you're interested in learning more, I really suggest this amazing book by Carolyn Dinshaw. But this is not just a historical phenomenon. Amateur literary critics continue to produce great work outside of formalized institutions. The critic and scholar Merve Emmer, for example, in Has Academia Ruined Literary Criticism, an essay for The New Yorker, describes the manifold sites that feed a rich literary culture outside of university professionalization. She lists some possible spaces as adult and continuing education programs, community centers, bookstores, book festivals, teach-ins, even the social media platforms of the internet. Speaking of the internet, a place, by the way, made and defined by amateur experimentation, I'd be want if I didn't mention one of my favorite places for amateur criticism, BookTube. Merve seconds my opinion when describing her surprising encounter with a whole new sphere of literary appreciation.
But of course, there's a much wider world of literature, was that there is an incredibly vibrant community of bookstagrammers and book talk influencers whose specialty is translated literature. And the way that they produce criticism about translated literature is to make these kind of long YouTube videos where they do perform orally what I would call close readings. And they keep blogs and they have communities. And this is a way of engaging with literature that I at least was not aware of.
And being produced outside of generic constraints of academic scholarship isn't necessarily a weakness. In fact, it's often more like a strength. Amateur criticism isn't afraid to wear its obsessiveness, its heart on its sleeve. Collectively built knowledge can often be valued more than an individual's singular take. The spontaneity required to share an opinion online or at events can make new perspectives legible. And interestingly, the outsider status of the amateur critic often lends itself to a criticism more apt at identifying pressing truths about the institutions that legitimate and authorize cultural work. Before I go a bit more in depth about a few of my favorite examples of amateur critics, I want to present my fail-proof 5 steps to becoming an amateur literary critic. 1. Read a lot. Consume a lot of the type of media you want to critique. And consume it mindfully. Annotate. Take notes that differentiate between a summary, analysis, and your reaction. Build your taste and, by extension, your trust in your critical intuition. Don't forget to read the kind of criticism you hope to create. And when you read this criticism, yes, allow yourself to be moved, but also pay attention to how it manages to move you. Don't forget to treat criticism like a craft too. 2. Learn the history of criticism or tell your own. There's lots of great sources to help you wade through the waters of this subject. Here are some of my favorites. Has Academia Ruined Literary Criticism, an essay for The New Yorker that I've already mentioned, historicizes the rise of the profession, and the manifold forms of entanglement and distance between literature and criticism in the centuries preceding that professionalization. Grace Lavery's On Being Criticized for a special issue on weak theory for the academic journal Modernism and Modernity vectors the history of criticism through a psychoanalytic account of Matthew Arnold's relationship with his father and with masculinity writ large. Literature Toward an Amateur Criticism, another article for that same special issue, tells the history of criticism through a feminist perspective, and there's a million other ways to narrate this history. I really suggest you pick a couple of your favorite critics and try and trace the lines between them throughout history. Trace those affinities. Number 3, practice. Don't let this one overwhelm you. Practice can mean a conversation with a friend, where you pinpoint your different experiences of a movie you watched together. It can mean engaging earnestly with the Goodreads or Letterboxd review box when you're logging your media. It can be as simple as a YouTube comment. And also don't forget to practice close reading. I start my close readings by returning to lines that spoke to me on my first encounter. I summarize the line's role in the piece's narrative or argument, then analyze the elements I believe caused the striking effect. I also like to describe my reaction in direct or conversational language. Once I amass a few of these close readings, I weave my opinions together and treat my analyses as evidence I use to support those claims. 4, literary citizenship. Attend events at independent bookstores and ask good questions. Join writing groups or host one. Design and execute a reading series. Participate in an online community or found one. Publish. Keep abreast with publishing news. Read good magazines. And 5, strive. Remember what I said about reading criticism? This should help you form a list of good criticism non-negotiables. Pull that list out when you're writing. Allow yourself to borrow and depart from those conventions. Don't be afraid to show your personal taste and involve a bit of personality. Keep the object's beauty in your sights. And remember the end goal, to make your experience of being moved by the art understood. I'll close with examples of amateur critical production. You might have noticed that I started cutting and rearranging photos. That's because the first example of amateur criticism that inspires me features a similar method. In McKeer and Vatty's A Literature Towards an Amateur Criticism, they describe Virginia Woolf's use of the devalued practice of scrapbooking to complete research for the heavy-hitting, serious essay on the causes of war titled 3 Guineas. The authors of this article argue that three large scrapbooks not only inform the style and structure of the more formally circulated essay, but also call into question a model of creative production that constantly premises the masculinized work of invention above a feminized work of gathering. The scrapbooks might seem, from a first glance, to be merely arranging or placing, but it is possible to think of them as inspiring and even executing on their own right, a highly successful comparative theoretical method. McKeer and Vatty connect Woolf to another writer, Kate Sambreno. The authors analyze her seminal, very 2010s blog, Frances Farmer is My Sister. And just while I'm describing this section, I'll be compiling my most recent Substack post so I can practice along with you a form of amateur critique. At the time of the blog's creation, Sambreno was an aspiring writer with a deep passion for modernist women writers. At the time of the blog's creation, Sambreno was an aspiring writer with a deep passion for modernist women artists. Despite her robust critical engagement with the works and legacy of these women, McKeer and Vatty describe blog posts detailing repeated rejections from PhDs, nominally because her obsessiveness didn't flag as expertise. But without credentials, Sambreno is turned away from Vivian Elliott's archives. When she petitions, the folks at the Bodleian Oxford Library tell her there is no expert who can help her access this collection, and so she cannot. Oh, the wildness of that ivory tower. In their assessment, Sambreno's blog takes spontaneity as a method, denies formalization, parties with ephemerality. Parties with ephemerality ideates about oversharing and playfully theorizes feminized forms of expression like excessive emotion. The post on Zambrino's blog refused productive assimilation. Indeed, a single piece operates more like a collection of fragments than a clear argument. Thanks for watching. You can find more of me on Substack or here.